The content in this presentation relates to revised B1 preliminary and B1 preliminary for schools for exams from January 2020. All the changes apply to B1 preliminary and B1 preliminary for schools, both the paper-based and computer-based versions of the exams. The changes include new and updated tasks across all of the papers, better alignment between the exams, showing clearer progression from one exam to the next, and an update to the way that grades are reported, bringing the exams in line with higher level Cambridge English qualifications. The revised tests allow for more opportunities for speaking and writing, which will allow strong candidates to demonstrate ability at the CEFR level above for extended certification. For example, a preliminary candidate will be able to demonstrate B2 level more effectively. As there is now more writing, it was decided to separate the reading and writing papers in preliminary and preliminary for schools, as there were concerns the joint paper could be too long. The speaking paper has been revised with more focus on fluency and interactive communication. As mentioned before, reading and writing have been divided into separate papers. This is why B1 preliminary now has 4 papers. It takes a bit longer than 2 hours in total. We will look at the new and revised tasks in more detail on the following slides, but this slide summarizes the basic changes. The reading paper now has 6 parts and takes 45 minutes. It's worth mentioning that 5 of the 6 parts overlap with Key and Key for Schools, and 5 of the 6 parts overlap with First and First for Schools. This brings better alignment across the exams. This slide summarizes the changes and only shows the new and revised items. Part 4 and 6 are new tasks, while Part 5 corresponds to a revised task of the old test. To outline the paper in brief, Parts 1 and 2 remain unchanged. Part 3 is the old Part 4 and involves reading a longer text for detailed understanding, with 5 multiple choice questions having 4 options A, B, C, and D. In the old test, the first question asked about the writer's purpose, but this has been removed as it overlapped with the final question on global understanding. Part 4 is a new gapped text task. Part 5 is a multiple choice gap filled task which focuses mainly on vocabulary. There are now 6 questions compared to 10 previously. Part 6 is a new open gap filled task. Candidates read for detailed understanding at word and sentence level, filling in 6 gaps in a text. This predominantly focuses on grammar and aligns preliminary and preliminary for schools with other exams. Let's now look at the 2 new tasks. This new task is similar to one in the B2 first exam. There are 5 gaps and candidates have to choose which sentence goes in which gap. There are 3 distractors. To do this, they have to understand the gist of the text and text structure, that is, coherence and cohesion. This open gap fill task has been introduced, bringing preliminary and preliminary for schools in line with Key and First. Candidates read a shorter text and complete 6 gaps using 1 word for each gap. The complete sentence must be meaningful and accurate, being the focus on grammatical structures, phrasal verbs, and fixed phrases. A list of structures can be found in the Handbook for Teachers. Writing is now a separate paper from reading, and it consists of 2 parts. Writing output has been raised from approximately 150 words to approximately 200 words. That is 100 words per task. and there is more opportunity for strong students to demonstrate a wider range of writing skills. Part 1 is a new email task. Part 2 is the same as the old writing Part 3, but students can now choose to write a story or an article rather than a letter, making the task more relevant to today's learners and broadening the range of writing skills tested. At the same time, this change allows for greater alignment with FIRST and ensures there is no overlap with Part 1, that is, the email.
In the old communicative message task, candidates wrote 35 to 45 words. They now have to write an email of about 100 words, so strong candidates have the opportunity to demonstrate the full breadth of their writing skills. This slide shows tasks from both preliminary and preliminary for schools, giving an example of how the topics vary across the two versions of the exams. Answers are assessed using the assessment scales, which consist of 4 subscales: content, communicative achievement, organization, and language. This scheme can be consulted in the Handbook for Teachers for exams from the year 2020.
In Part 2, candidates now have a choice between an article rather than a letter or a story. An article is suitable for eliciting language functions appropriate to B1. Candidates can write about feelings and opinions about a subject that is familiar to them, so they can produce a personal, concrete response based on their own personal experiences. This new task will enable stronger candidates to write something more elaborate and demonstrate a wider range of writing skills than the old test. This is also assessed using the assessment scales. Let's now move to the listening paper. This paper remains the same length, but there have been some changes to the tasks and to the order they are in, so the less complex tasks come first. In the new listening paper, parts 1 and 3 remain unchanged. Part 2 is a new task. Candidates listen to 6 short unrelated texts and choose the right answer, A, B, or C. Part 4 is similar to all Part 2. Candidates listen to a longer text for detailed understanding and choose the right answer. In the old test, the format was a long monologue or an interview, but the text will now always be an interview. The new Part 2 task is similar to First and First for Schools Listen in Part 1 and the new Part 4 task in Key and Key for Schools. Candidates listen to 6 short recordings and answer a 3-option multiple choice question about each text. The testing focus is on understanding gist and identifying opinions and attitudes. The speaking paper is very similar to the old test, but there are some minor changes that make it more similar to First and First for Schools. There have been no changes to Part 1. In the introductory phase, there is a short conversation between the interlocutor and each candidate. This is an opportunity for candidates to show their interactional and social language skills. In Part 2, each candidate talks about a different photo. The two photos are no longer thematically linked to each other as they were in the old test. Part 3 is the same as the old Part 2. The interlocutor gives the candidate some pictures and describes the situation. The candidates then use functional language to discuss alternatives, make a response to suggestions, and negotiate agreement as to the best course of action for the situation described. Part 4 is similar to all Part 4, but is now thematically linked to the collaborative task in Part 3 and not to the photos as it was before, which makes it flow more naturally as a conversation. There is a 3-way discussion with interlocutor. Candidates talk about their preferences, habits, and opinions in relation to the topic. In part 2, candidates should describe the people and activities in the photographs as fully as possible. They should imagine they are describing the photograph to someone who can't see it. This may include naming all the objects, describing colors, clothing, time of day, weather, etc. Candidates can also show their ability to organize their language using simple connectives. In part 3, the interlocutor reads the instructions once, setting up the situation, while the candidates look at the prompt material. The prompt material is a set of images which is designed to generate the candidate's own ideas about an imaginary situation. A title is now printed on the candidate's material, so the focus of the task is made more explicit. However, the examiner doesn't repeat the task instructions, so candidates need to listen carefully. In part 4, the interlocutor directs the interaction by asking questions which encourage the candidates to discuss further and broaden the topic introduced in part 3. They are encouraged to talk about their personal experiences, express their own likes and dislikes, and share their opinions. Grades have changed to be in line with higher level Cambridge English qualifications. The main change to the way results are reported is that from January 2020, candidates get an A, B, C grade rather than pass with distinction, pass with merit, pass as they did previously. This brings preliminary and preliminary for schools into line with first, advanced, and proficiency. Be on the watch for news about upcoming exam sessions and thank you for being part of Cambridge team.